so if it's real or fake. Golden Greek told us the giant goon Dickoff, El Toro, the Grunt Brothers too. The wild Samoans got something crazy going. They're gonna be going after you. Wrestling tonight. Everything is bigger than life. Wrestling tonight. Rock and roll and wrestling tonight. Flying drop kick, suplex, mail, stomping on the throat, pulling on the hair. Take your fall scissors, back break the knee.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Wrestling Tonight, the spooky, scary Devil's Night Eve edition.
The Halloween edition?
Yes. I am your hardcore host, Mad Dog Butch. With me, as always, the Damien 666 to my Halloween. None other than Brace Beemer.
Yeah. Well, how's it going tonight?
Not too bad.
And that's a fantastic mask that you have on there. It looks like the, is that the Masked Superstar mask?
Technically, this is the Matt Classic mask, but I'm pretty sure he just ripped off the Masked Superstar mask.
Oh, okay.
But honestly, I was probably a bigger fan of the Matt Classic gimmick than the Masked Superstar. Masked Superstar was awesome, but
it's got a little
Matt
destroyer
Classic
in
was
it
awesome too. Oh yeah, that's true. Mach 3. Destroyer Mach 3, that is.
Yeah.
So our guest this week, first of all, we are going to be reviewing the very spooky and scary Halloween Havoc 1989, the inaugural edition from World Championship Wrestling. But joining us will be none other than Frankentiner from the Content Abnormal podcast. Are you there, Frank?
I am.
I'm sorry. You are joining us from the deep, dark, dank depths of his sub-secret subterranean studio, Area MCA 51. Is that correct?
You are correct, sir. How you doing tonight?
We are doing well. I just wanted to ask you a few questions real quick about Content Abnormal before we delve right into reviewing this pay-per-view. How did you decide to get started with the? First of all, explain to anybody that might not know what the Content Abnormal podcast entails.
Well, Content Abnormal was inspired by guys like TV horror hosts like The Ghoul, whom I saw sometimes on TV when I was a kid, and Wolfman Mac. He had his show for a while there, Nightmare Cinema, and then that became Chiller Drive-In. Those guys that would present spooky movies, like B movies from the 1950s or 60s, like public domain stuff. And they would perform sketches, when they'd introduce the movies, and sometimes when they were going to commercial break or coming back from it. I wanted to kind of do the same thing, but present spooky old-time radio broadcasts, which I've been a big fan of since I was a little kid.
Oh, that's a cool idea.
So that's what we do. It's a half an hour long. I upload an episode weekly. Usually it's before noon on Saturdays. You get a new episode.
Okay.
The most recent one that we did was it featured an episode of the show The Inner Sanctum.
Okay, great.
It had an interpretation of Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart, and it starred Boris Karloff, and it was amazing.
All right, cool. I got to check that out still. I did see that on your page.
Hey, I got a question for Frank here. Hey, Frank, have you seen any of Sir Graves Ghastly's work?
That's just what I was going to ask.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I have not. My mom used to watch him when she was a little girl. He was on TV then. The only thing I've ever seen of Sir Graves was this clip that they would sometimes weave into Wolfman Mac's show, like the early show when it was Nightmare Cinema. They would show Sir Graves doing that laugh of his for like 2 or 3 seconds. He would go, and they zoom in on him. That's all I've ever seen of him, though.
He
Now-
was one of my favorites.
Now, one other guy, yeah, I grew up with Sir Graves Ghastly as well. So everybody that came after, I kind of judged by that bar. So I honestly don't remember the Ghoul. I mean, I'm sure that I saw him. I mean, I saw him later on. I actually saw him live later on, but I don't remember him as a kid. I must have been watching something else at that time. But one that came along later was Count Scary. Do you remember Count Scary as well?
Oh yeah, Count Scary. Yeah, the first time I think I ever saw a horror host on TV, I believe it was the time that he and the Ghoul, they worked together on a TV special.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, later on.
Might have been Channel 50.
I think it was.
I don't remember the movie that they were showing, but
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah, I do remember Count Scary.
Okay. Now, how many episodes of Content Abnormal have you done so far?
The most recent one that I uploaded, I believe that was episode number 61. So we've
Oh,
been
wow.
going for just over a year now.
Oh, okay, great. Right along with us, pretty much.
Yeah.
Now I'm looking at the screen and I see that in our graphic you are wearing a beautiful title belt. What title belt is that?
Well, what you're looking at there, that's an illustration by my alter ego, Mr. Joshua Riles, and that was for the most recent issue of Content Abnormal magazine. We've got a magazine too, and it's like that was inspired by like famous monsters of Filmland,
Okay.
and we're on issue number 2 of that, and the most recent issue celebrates like the connection between pro wrestlers and horror movies. It's all about like we review movies that feature pro wrestlers who became actors like Roddy Piper and Tor Johnson and so forth. So for that issue, for the table of contents page, my alter ego, Mr. Joshua Riles, just wanted to come up with an illustration for me because I'm like the Alfred E. Newman of the magazine. I'm like
Okay.
the weird mascot who's just kind of gets around all the pages. He wanted to come up with a special like championship belt for me, Frankentiner. So it looks like an old-timey radio,
Yeah.
and there's like some lightning bolts coming out of each side of it, and yeah, it's just
Okay.
I don't know what you'd call it. It's my championship belt. That's all.
Well, everybody in the crowd has their own championship belt nowadays too. So I guess it doesn't really matter. But you now how does one get their hands on the Content Abnormal magazine?
Well, the print run of it was very limited. We only wound up printing 65 issues of Content Abnormal issue number 1. And the
Okay.
most recent one, I could only afford to get 10 of them printed. So
Oh,
those
okay.
are pretty much, the printed versions are pretty much for very close family and friends and for contributors to the magazine.
Oh, okay.
But anybody can read the whole thing, all of the contents, online at our website, which is contentabnormal.tumblr, and that's Tumblr without an E.com. You can find the whole thing there, and you can see outside cover, inside cover, all of the interior pages. And yeah, it's
Alright.
pretty easy to read from mobile device. I've tried reading it on my phone, and I did okay with that.
All right, that sounds great. I will have to check that out. But let's get into our topic. Like I said, Halloween Havoc 1989, the inaugural Halloween. Excuse me. Now this was not too long after Ted Turner had taken it over. I at the end I noticed the first name that popped up as the executive producer is Jim Hurd. This was like before it got too bad. The Ding Dongs had not debuted yet, but you could tell that there was like a shift in things. I thought as far as well, we'll get into it as we go along, but I do remember when they first announced that they were going to have a Halloween Havoc pay-per-view. I thought, okay, mixing wrestling with Halloween, it's kind of a no-brainer. No offense, Frank, but it's and so I had these high hopes for all these things that they could do, and as I will point out as I go along, I think that they really dropped the ball with at least this first one. I think later on, and we'll probably review some later on as well, but I think they really dropped the ball with the Halloween theme in this one.
Yeah, if we keep doing this for another 10 years, we can probably get through all of them, huh?
Yeah, they did do quite a few of them.
Or 15? I don't know how many they did.
Yeah, I don't remember how many they did either. But let's start. Oh, and I didn't realize this, but it's called Halloween Havoc Settling the Score.
I didn't notice that either.
It took place almost exactly 30 years ago today, on October 28th, 1989, from the Philly Civic Center. And Jim Ross and Bob Cottle are our announcers. They give us a quick intro. They also tell us that Gordon Soley and Christopher Cruz are going to be doing backstage interviews. That takes us up to match number 1, which is Tom Zenk versus Captain Mike Rotundo. Now, the very first thing that struck me was Captain Mike Rotundo, who had been doing the Varsity Club gimmick for a while, still got a lot of heat in the beginning.
Yeah.
But then when they announced Tom Zenk got about double the heat as a babyface.
Yeah. A lot of that going on in this crowd tonight.
The match itself, I thought was a decent enough opener. Tom Zenk had been, I believe, now was he in AWA right before this, or was that after?
It was after this. Yeah, because he went back at the end and went in their tournament. I think Zbyszko wound up winning that one. I believe it was after.
But Zenk was the last one that he eliminated in that battle
I believe
royal.
so. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, any thoughts on this match, Frankentiner?
Well, I grew up watching Mike Rotunda's IRS in the WWF. So when I sat down to watch this, I watched it a couple of times this month here because I've got the WWE Network, so I decided to make a thing of like just going through all of the Halloween Havocs.
Mm-hmm.
And when I watched this one, I mean, my feeling about it was that it was a pretty good opener between two hard workers, a couple of dependable, technically sound wrestlers, and they got some reaction out of the crowd. So I thought it was a pretty good opener. I wasn't really like heavily invested in it because, I'm not familiar with the whole Varsity Club thing. I was wondering what the VC was, what it stood for on Mike Rotunda's singlet, so I'm glad they explained that. One of the commentators did, Jim Ross, about Cottle.
Yeah.
Which, but I thought it was an okay match. I thought.
Yeah, Rotundo had a great run as a heel, as part of the Varsity Club, especially like the beginnings of it. Nobody had really seen. I think he had been a babyface all the way up until that point, and he was a guy that I would have never really pictured as a heel up until that point, and he just did a fantastic job. The Varsity Club had pretty much disbanded at this point, and I had forgotten why later on Jim Hurd and whoever else was running things at the time turned him into a Seaboat captain. And they eventually turned him babyface and started having him wear like a captain's hat, and apparently that's why, because he was the captain of the Varsity Club. So they decided to leave the captain name, but let's turn him into a boat captain for absolutely no reason at all.
Yeah, and they went then into the Turner archives and got the skipper's hat for him to wear in the ring.
Yeah,
for Gilligan's Island.
Right. Brace, any thoughts on this match that we haven't already covered? Oh, I will say this. Mike Rotundo ends up winning it with a roll through. Or no, I'm sorry, not Mike Rotundo. Tom Zenk ends up winning it because Rotundo goes for a reverse body press. You would see this move about 3 times later on in different matches too. But Zenk catches him and rolls through, gets the victory, and gets booed out of the building.
Yeah, that was kind of a one of the standard spots for that time.
Yeah,
the old flying body press roll.
But
through.
it wasn't something that Rotundo normally did.
Yeah.
If anything, I could have seen Zenk doing that. But
Yeah.
but anyway.
For this match, what I found the most interesting, besides the work of Mike Rotundo, who's Bray Wyatt's dad in the WWE?
Yes.
Does he still go by Bray Wyatt?
Well, now he is. Yeah, but he's also the Fiend.
Oh, okay. So.
His
work was phenomenal, but it was fun just watching the crowd boo Tom Zenk.
It was.
Because they really didn't like Mike Rotundo. One of the best technically sound wrestlers I've ever seen is Mike
Yeah.
Rotundo. His suplexes, like every single one was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like, that he's ever done.
Yeah.
I mean, he did another sweet suplex, and we've talked about this on the show.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, just the regular vertical suplex. He made it look
Yeah, the crowd
look
was
great.
so against Tom Zink that when Mike Rotundo was cheating and using the ropes for leverage on a hold, like a scissors or a abdominal stretch, like the referee would look at the crowd to like ask if Rotundo was holding the rope, and the crowd would say no, even though
Right.
Rotundo's supposed to be the bad guy.
Right.
Some of the best abdominal stretches in the business. In 1981, he wrestled in Montreal for international wrestling when he was starting.
Rotundo did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I never knew
Yeah,
that.
and speaking of the Destroyer, the Mask, Dick Beyer,
Yeah.
he was trained by Mike Rotundo was trained by the Destroyer, Dick Beyer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I don't think I ever realized that either.
yeah. Oh, and the last thing about the finish, the roll through with Zank, I noticed, I knew this before, but one of the reasons why he didn't get over is because he was too much of a pretty boy.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
and like when he won, he did that little leap, you know, like George Goulas did.
Oh, just,
and
yeah.
and-
Well, yeah, go ahead.
so he did this little leap as kind of like a prancing, like a ballerina leap. And a lot of French Canadians did that. Rick Martel did that, and
Yeah,
I
you're
don't
right.
think that's the reason why he really got over as good as he was, is because he just didn't seem tough.
Yeah.
The Rougeaus
That's probably
was another one.
That's probably part of it, but I will say that like when it looked like Zank was going to make a comeback in this match, it was about the weakest comeback I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
He whipped Rotundo and gave him an elbow out of the corner, and then he gave him like that ear ringer thing.
Yeah,
And then Rotundo came back, and then that led to the finish.
but he did a good job. I mean, it was a good opening match, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I was always a fan of Zank until his WCW run. Honestly, like when we saw him
Well,
in
he got
international.
exposed.
Yeah, when we saw him in international, he was good.
Yeah.
His WWE run, even though it was real short, I mean, he did a good job for what he had to
And
do.
he was in tag matches, so you really didn't.
right.
They were able to kind of mask some of that inexperience, if you will.
Yeah. All right. So then we get an interview with Bruno Sammartino along with Christopher Cruz. He is going to be our special guest referee for the main event, and I felt like Bruno was shooting. It seemed to me like he wholeheartedly believed everything that he said. I think it was a total shoot on Bruno's part.
That's funny because I wrote down, aside from it was a great interview by Bruno, that it sounded legit.
It did.
You know, like he did it perfect, old school, like it was a sporting contest, and Bruno Sammartino, the legend, was going to come in and cut it right down the middle.
Exactly.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Frankentiner, any thoughts on the Bruno Sammartino interview?
That's great.
Well, I agree with what you guys said. I mean, the way that he did it, he said everything, you know, with like conviction. I mean, he really seemed genuinely convinced that he might be called upon to, you know, have to get between some guys and, yeah, lay down the law and put somebody in a headlock if they got out of hand. You know, I like this style of promo. It was real, just kind of direct, you know, no nonsense. And I mean, you looked at him and the feeling I got was he believed it. You know, he believed it. He said everything with conviction.
He even looked like
Yeah.
a referee.
Yeah, he did.
And we'll see how Bruno handles business later on.
And that's like a big part I think that's missing in the business today. It's like, I mean, especially ones that are written for someone else. It's like, you know, how can you you know, portray that as I mean, I guess you could try to make it your own as much as possible, but it's just, I mean, watching this, just the whole format of it, I really liked, because you know you'd have like the quick backstage interviews, and then you'd go to the matches. So with that, we go to match number 2, which is the Midnight Express and Dr. Death Steve Williams versus the Samoan SWAT team. And I should mention that Nick Patrick was the referee for the last match. Tommy Young is the referee in this match. So basically, it's just those two guys throughout the whole thing, and they just you know, they do one match and then skip over.
Thanks for bringing that up. I can't believe I didn't mention the referee on the first one. I got it written down and everything.
Yeah, Tommy Young, one of the greatest referees of all time, and Nick Patrick, no slouch himself.
Yeah.
But you know, this match, I don't remember how Dr. Death Steve Williams ended up with the Midnight Express, but I was watching it. I was
Yeah, I
thinking,
don't either.
I just think they didn't have anything else for him to do, so they threw him with there. But talk about over. Holy crapola. I mean, not only the Midnight Express and Jim Cornette as baby faces, which we never saw a whole lot throughout their careers, but when Dr. Death came in, man, the crowd was going insane.
Yeah. Yeah, they were just looking for, I think overall, looking for a certain style of combat, if you will, that night. You know,
Yeah.
a certain style of wrestling, and Dr. Death fit the bill, Steve Williams.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it before. Midnight Express, my favorite act of all time. You're close to your favorite tag team of all
Yeah.
time. I know that.
Yeah.
Frank, what did you think of this match?
Well, this was my first really. I had heard of Dr. Death, Steve Williams, before, but I mean, this was my first good look at him, and my impression of him was that he was a very, very intense guy. He was thick, he was powerful. Everything he did was really high impact. And I know I've watched your show before, so I know you're a big, beautiful Bobby Eaton fan.
Yeah.
So right away, I'm thinking, okay, this is Mad Dog Butch's tag team right here.
Exactly.
And one thing I was really impressed by Sweet Stan Lane's form with those kicks, those side kicks that he would kind of use to create distance with his opponents.
Mhm.
I mean, it didn't seem like he landed them that often. It was more of like just, let me back you up a little bit, and he would kind of, get
Yeah.
in this side stance and throw this kick. And
Right.
right away I thought, well, this guy's got pretty good form. And then one of the commentators informed us that he was a former karate instructor who was discovered by Ric Flair at a beach party, and that's how he
Yeah.
got into the business.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised they mentioned that. I believe Stan Lane is the only wrestler to ever be trained by Ric Flair.
Oh, he was trained by him. He wasn't just discovered by him. He trained him too, huh?
Yeah, yes, he did. At least that's what the story is, anyway. And another guy in this match that I mean, I was a big fan of a lot of these guys in this match at one point. I was like a pretty big fan of Dr. Death at one point too. More of his UWF stint, but the Tonga Kid, who they were calling the Samoan Savage at this point,
Yeah.
and Samu, one of the SST. Oh, and I should mention that they were with Sir Oliver Humperdinck, that they were calling the Big Kahuna at this point. But Samu, at one point when he was in International, was probably my favorite wrestler at that time. So he's no slouch either. I think it was, a good match for what it was. The ending was Jim Cornette gets up onto the apron, or Humperdinck gets up on the apron. Cornette whacks him with the. Did he whack him with the tennis racket first, or did he just like throw him off or punch him or something?
He just threw him off. I don't think the
Somebody
tennis
hit with
racket
it.
came in, did it?
Tennis racket.
What'd you say, Frank?
Yeah, I think somebody got hit with that tennis racket, wasn't it? Wasn't him got
Well,
hit with the tennis racket, got up on the
I-
apron, and then the Samoans were able to steal it?
Well, yeah, he was up on the apron. I don't remember if he actually whacked Humperdinck with the. He might have whacked him with it, but either way, Lane's standing there. Tonga Kid gives him like a flying headbutt from behind. Lane kind of like runs into the tennis racket himself, and then takes the pinfall there.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, decent match. Nothing really on the line. At one point, it seemed like any time a new person would kind of take over WCW, it seemed like they'd try to bury the Midnight Express. So, and not that they were buried, but I know they put them in the feud with the Samoan SWAT team, and I thought it was a decent feud.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, not easily not the best. I mean, obviously not the best Midnight Express match of all time, but it was good for what it was.
Yeah. I mean, I had it the same, I think I wrote down a decent match. Tonga Kid was also from international wrestling, is a loaf of the Polynesian Prince. Wasn't that Tonga, or was that?
No, that was the other one.
Oh,
that was Fatu.
Fatu. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Another international wrestling reference. One thing I noticed, the crowd reaction. Like whenever I watch these, I pay attention. I just always have. It's so different than now. It's like when I'm watching it here, they're anticipating the start of the match, the whole match, and the finish.
Yeah.
They were involved. They wanted to
Right.
see the match, and I thought that's pretty cool comparing it to modern times where you really, maybe if Lesnar's having a match, and I mean, I try and watch it sometimes, but I can't.
Right.
So
Yeah.
from what I can tell, I mean, it's completely different. And Jim Ross delivering a lot of history lessons during this card.
Yeah, he was.
Which was nice because I remember him making a point to do it because it was never getting done anywhere.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there was a lot of shoot stuff that he threw out there too. But that brings us to the next interview with Gordon.
Well, I want to one more point on this match. I didn't think the SST's Samoan SWAT team looked very well on this one. They were sloppy in a lot of spots, and at the end, like the timing wasn't off. I don't know if they just got there or they brought the other one in there and it just kind of threw the timing off. But I mean, it was decent. They weren't bad enough where it made the match bad, but it just didn't.
I will say this: that was one thing about that feud. I thought the matches were okay, but they weren't as finely tuned as, say, the Midnights versus the Fantastics.
Oh, sure, and they weren't going to be.
Or the Rock and Roll Express or anything like that. And yeah, you're right. They did kind of throw the Samoan Savage Tonga Kid in there later on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I didn't really have a problem with it.
Yeah, me neither. It just wasn't.
It looked okay.
Because Midnight Express, the bar is like up here.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But yeah, like I mean, it was a decent match. I was just expecting more out of the Samoan SWAT team.
Yeah.
Because it was like they were half on and 75% on and 25% off.
Okay, so that takes us to the next interview, which is Gordon Solie with Gary Hart and Terry Funk. Talking about the Thunderdome cage match main event, which is going to be an electrified cage. Terry Funk says he's going to do the 1,000-watt boogie or 10,000-watt boogie. And I should mention this. We talked about this last time, but I didn't realize how much the Mad Max movies have really influenced pro wrestling, especially at that time.
Oh yeah.
You had Lord Humongous as a wrestler. You had the Thunderdome, and then what?
So we had the Road Warriors.
Yeah, the Road Warriors. Yeah, exactly.
Demolition.
Yeah. This brings us to match number 3, which is Fidel Sierra, the Cuban Assassin, versus the returning former NWA World Champion Tommy Wildfire Rich. We get a Tommy Rich sucks chant throughout the match when the crowd wasn't totally dead. Nothing against the Cuban Assassin, but he's not really. They never really did anything with him to make him a pay-per-view caliber type wrestler.
Right. Yeah. I kind of noted that. It's like, what the heck?
Josh, Frankentiner, are you familiar at all with, were you familiar with the Cuban Assassin?
No, this was my only look at the Cuban Assassin. I mean, I got to tell you guys, I was only 6 years old when this event occurred, and growing up, I did not have cable, so the only knowledge I even had of World Championship Wrestling, the only way that I even knew that the promotion existed when I was a kid, was from the rubber action figures that I'd find at like Big Lots. Lots of times they were like open package. That's how I knew that Ric Flair and Sting and the biggest superstars in that promotion were around. So yeah, when I went through these Halloween Havocs, this is my first look at lots of these people. And the Cuban Assassin was one of them. It's the only time I've seen him wrestle.
What about Tommy Wildfire Rich? I mean, later on he became part of Extreme Championship Wrestling as the Big Don. Tommy Rich is part of the Full Blooded Italians, and then he got a better reaction as a heel in Philly. Were you familiar with him? And he is a former. It got mentioned real quick, but he is a former NWA World Champion with a victory over Harley Race, actually.
I mean, my impression of him was that, he looked like a guy who'd been around for a while and knew what he was doing. He was in pretty good shape. And don't they say it at one point during the match? Doesn't one of the commentators say that, he kind of was out of the spotlight for a while? There was a time where he was, one of the premier talents in the world of pro wrestling. Then, what was it, an injury? Or
yeah, Jim Ross just mentioned
one reason
that.
or another, he kind of got away. And so this was he was kind of mounting a comeback at this stage of his career, trying to ascend back to main event status.
You got it.
Yep, that's exactly what happened. And Luger. I mean, we'll mention Luger later, but Luger kind of feuded with two people around this time. Pillman being one of them, and they have that match later. but Tommy Rich was another one. And I will say those two actually had some great matches. This match is not a good representation of what Tommy Rich did around this time. He made a good comeback, I thought. They kind of pushed him to a certain level when he first came back, but then he kind of got relegated to being mid-Carter or less than mid-Carter later on.
Yeah.
And then not too long after that, he went to ECW, I believe. Or he probably went back to Memphis for a while.
Yeah, I think he did Independence for a while
Yeah.
before ECW came along.
So anyway, Tommy Rich ends up winning the match with a sloppy Luthez press, sloppier than normal. The match, I mean, it's hard to rate this match. I mean, it was pretty much a glorified squash match on a pay-per-view.
Yeah, it was a good match, though.
I mean, it wasn't bad, and like I said,
for what it was on the
I'm not
card.
taking anything away from Fidel Sierra. I mean, he's
He's a
like
good
a
hand.
long time. He is, and he had some good matches in UWF as well. But it was just WCW had never really done anything with him, and then to throw him onto pay-per-view.
Yeah.
I mean, they had a pretty deep roster at this point. I mean, they could have had somebody else that would have been a little bit more impressive for Tommy Rich to beat. At this
I think
point.
you looked at my notes while I was taking them.
I did not, but
yeah, the same sentiment.
so I mean, the match is what it was. It's a fill-in match.
Yeah, it was nice seeing Tommy Rich win with the Luthez press. That was one of my favorite moves.
But that was a sloppily executed one.
And they're hard to do right though. I mean, that's kind of why I quit doing them. And they're hard to take.
But he used to be able to do them well.
Yeah, it depends on
For the most part.
Yeah.
He did them well later on. But
and Tommy Rich was one of the biggest stars in wrestling in the late 70s.
oh yeah.
Into the early 80s. You hear some guys, oh, he was the Hulk Hogan of the time. Well, he was.
He was.
You had the Hogan there, and then you had the Hogan in Florida, and you had the Hogan in Minneapolis. But he was a big name. He got out on TBS. When he went around the country, it sold out.
And,
Michigan included.
We should mention the legendary feud before this that he had with Buzz Sawyer, Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer in Mid-South. And a lot of people said, that this was, for whatever reason, after he lost the world title and he just whatever, he got de-pushed or whatever. That was a lot. The announcers would always say that, would be like, oh, well, that feud with Buzz Sawyer, that's what, he was never the same after that. It took a lot out of him. So that was always kind of their excuse for him not being at the top anymore.
But you're right. They could have had the Tommy Rich that you need to see is like the older Tommy Rich. He didn't have a blood feud in WCW to really get the whole Tommy Rich. He was more of a Southern style wrestler, like
and Buzz Sawyer
a lot more punching and whatever. You know, but
and Buzz Sawyer did show up not too long after this in WCW, and they did. It seemed like they were going to try to have them feud again. I mean, they did have some matches, but it never really.
Yeah, I barely
rose
remember
to
that.
They did, because I was hoping that they would like stick them in a feud again.
Yeah,
and,
now you bring it up
and reignite it, but they just they had a couple throwaway matches. I mean, the matches were decent.
Yeah,
but they never really did a whole lot with
the stakes weren't big enough for what Tommy Rich needed.
Right. So that takes us to our next interview with Gordon Soley, along with the fabulous Freebirds, the World Tag Team Champions at the time. A lot of people, and so the Freebirds at this time are P.S. Michael Hayes and Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin. A lot of people crap on this team. I will throw this out here. They had been aligned already back in World Class Championship Wrestling.
Oh yeah.
So I never really had a problem with it.
I agree
was
with you.
Was it as great as the Terry Gordy, Buddy Roberts version? Probably not.
No.
But still, I mean, he was always kind of like considered the unofficial fourth Freebird, even going back to their World Class days.
Yeah, I think part of the problem I hate bringing up a problem. I mean, it was a good match, and we'll talk about it. But they had a different style than you were used to when they were the other Freebirds.
Right.
They didn't play the chicken crap heel. They didn't beg off. They didn't cheat a whole lot. It's like they played like tough guys, like street guys,
and they shouldn't have. And they shouldn't have. That was never their role before that. Okay, so let's get into that. Match number 4, World Tag Team Championship. The Fabulous Freebirds versus the Dynamic Dudes, along with Jim Cornette, one of the most hated babyface teams of all time. Pretty much had heat on him throughout the whole match. Josh, Frankentiner, did you were you familiar with the Dynamic Dudes before this?
No, this is my first look at the Dynamic Dudes and their skateboards, and wasn't familiar with them prior to this. No.
What is your initial impression of them now?
Well, I had seen Shane Douglas before. I'd seen some of his ECW stuff, Shane Franchise Douglas. I can't tell you for sure that I'd seen Johnny Ace before. They came walking down. I cracked up. My first look at them. They have the skateboards, and they're kind of like these big buff dudes, but they're kind of like dressed like California teenage kids. I'm gonna go to the skate park and then hang out at the beach afterwards. And the Dynamic Dudes name that just cracked me up.
What did you think of the match overall?
I thought it was a pretty good match. I mean, it just the crowd seemed to really be into it. I think because of the Freebirds. I do like the Freebirds. I like Michael P.S. Hayes. I like I like listening to him talk, and I get a kick out of his moves, and, walking to and from the ring.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty decent match, and the announcers did mention that Michael P.S. Hayes was one of the first ones to come out to rock and roll music, and and that's true. Not too long after this. So what was going on here was Jim Cornette had taken the Dynamic Dudes under his wing. So eventually they led to a feud where I think they did an angle where Johnny Ace had stolen one of Stan Lane's girlfriends or something. So there was
I forgot about
so
that.
there was some jealousy there, and it wasn't too long after this pay-per-view, there was like a pay-per-view or a Clash of Champions where the Dynamic Dudes took on the Midnights. Jim Cornette ended up being in the Dynamic Dudes corner, and then ended up turning on the Dynamic Dudes, which turned the Midnights back to heels. And it was one of the biggest pops I've ever heard when Cornette turned on the Dynamic Dudes, even though that's not the way it was supposed to go. I personally think, and then especially watching this match, I personally think that they could have turned the Dudes bad. I think they could have been, Heat Machine. I don't know though. That maybe they would have got cheered after they turned heel. They probably would have. But Brace, what are your thoughts on this?
This was a very good match. I liked it. I mean, I feel sorry for the Dynamic Dudes and the crowd getting all over them. And when we went to Kobo. Did you go to the Kobo card with the Dynamic Dudes? Wasn't that me, you, and Frank Williams Jr.? Against the Midnights, and we were booing them out of the building.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm pretty sure that was one of them that we saw.
Two like pretty good workers, and they were younger at the time, still a little bit to learn, but they were pretty good, and they just got saddled with that gimmick, and the crowd would not. What I noticed was if they even screwed up just a hair.
Yeah,
the crowd would get all over him because they didn't like him already.
Right.
And I wrote down a question for you.
Okay.
And maybe this is to you, Frank, because you brought this up. Were the Freebirds that over with the crowd, or did they hate the Dynamic Dudes that much where the Freebirds got that big of a reaction?
I think
I want to say.
No, go ahead.
I agree with Brace. I just want to say I agree with Brace. When he said that they thought this was a good match, you jarred my memory a bit. Yeah, this was a pretty good match. I think Johnny Ace and Shane Douglas both looked outstanding in it. But to answer your question, I think it was a combination of the two. I think the Fabulous Freebirds were just way over, and the Dynamic Dudes, people just they looked at these guys just because of the gimmick, not because of their in-ring work. But I mean, the gimmick. I think people were looking at them and groaning. And a question I have for you guys: do you have any idea how long they were together? Because my very first thought when I saw them walking out was like, oh, these guys, this couldn't have lasted long. They couldn't have been together.
It wasn't long, maybe a year.
You talking about the Dudes, right? You talking about the Dynamic Dudes? Yeah, probably maybe a year and a half.
Yeah, wasn't
Uh,
long.
I'm surprised it wasn't even that long.
And
Yeah, well, it was different back then. You didn't have everything right on TV every week. So
like I had mentioned, this is the beginning of the Jim Herd era. I think that if it would have been somebody else, if it was still Dusty, I think that it probably would have not gone on as long, or something would have changed. They would have changed it up somehow, because it wasn't just this incident. The Dynamic Dudes were getting booed pretty much everywhere and every time.
yeah,
The Freebirds were relatively over at this point, I would say. But I think this particular incident, the reason that the Freebirds were so over was because the Dynamic Dudes were so hated.
yeah, because I was
And-
kind of torn. Maybe sitting like right in the middle.
I mean, they were
probably.
pretty over, because I remember
Yeah.
right around this time, it might have been before this, but right around this time, Michael P.S. Hayes beat Luger for the U.S. belt. And it might have been after this, and the crowd popped.
Oh yeah,
It was,
yeah.
but Terry Gordy
That's
also
right. I
had
remember
just
that.
come back too.
Yeah.
So yeah, the crowd popped huge for it. So they were over as heels, but to answer your question, I think just this particular match, I think it was just because the dudes were so hated.
And it was Philly, so that's why I asked.
Yeah.
Two more quick things on this one, Mad Dog. The crowd's so much more engaged in the matches. And Frank, I don't know if you picked this up while you were watching it, not being a fan of that era initially. The crowd is so much more engaged in the matches. And it
Yeah,
I mean, from move to move, they're into everything.
Yeah.
Not just like the finish or the entrance. Somebody like in a previous match, somebody in the Midnight Express match, Bobby punched somebody. Bobby Eaton, just one punch.
Yes.
The other guy goes down and the crowd goes, oh.
yeah.
And it's
I
not
did catch
because
that.
they didn't do anything else. It's just that it was so good and it was timed right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
and
a
then
lot- Yeah, a lot of people in the audience, they were so emotionally invested. I mean, yeah, the momentum shifts, the big moves that signaled a shift in dominance in the match, it would get a huge pop. I mean, like this was family in the audience, like they knew him personally. They were
Yeah.
just that
yeah.
into it. Yeah.
And the last thing I have on that one is, I mean, I think I mentioned before that the finish was just timed perfectly. You can't, you don't find that anymore, and that kind of goes into later on too. But
Yeah, I just want to mention the finish. I forgot to mention that. The Dynamic Dudes finisher was like it was pretty cool. I mean, it was like a slingshot double back suplex. So they went for that match. One of them on the outside grabs Johnny Ace's foot and pulls him down.
Yeah.
And then I think it was Garvin that was still in the ring, ends up turning over and then getting the victory.
yeah, it was done very well. But the best
Was.
the best finish on the card so far, and probably, I mean, maybe the best match so far. I mean, there hasn't really been any stinkers, but just because
Yeah.
of the finish and the spot on the card, that's why I think the finish was so well.
Yeah.
I mean, it was good anyway, but for the spot on the card, that's the best match so far.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. And the Freebirds get a huge pop when they win.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
And the other last thing is, this is where I kind of noticed that, man, there's a bunch of tag team matches on this card, which we don't have anymore.
Well, I thought about that, but AEW is actually doing a pretty good job of bringing tag
Oh,
team
good.
wrestling back. They're doing a tag team tournament right now.
Cool.
I haven't seen a whole lot of the new NWA, but from what I understand, they're doing a pretty decent job of it as well. WWE is trying, but just the way but it's just the same old with them.
Yeah.
It's like they say that they're going to focus back on the tag team division, but then, it's just the same thing where like this team comes out of nowhere, beats somebody in a non-title match, and it's just like the same rotation over and over and over with what they're doing with that.
Well, hopefully it turns out well enough for the other two groups, and all the teams were big. I mean,
Yeah.
physically huge, except
Well,
like monsters.
Yeah, we mentioned this in the beginning. Ole was the booker at this time, and that is one thing that he definitely did was try to refocus on tag teams. And they had some great tag teams in here at the
Yeah.
time. They really did.
Yeah.
But let's move on to the next interview, which is again Christopher Cruz along with the Steiner brothers, and Scott. Was I mean he kind of became known later for kind of his stumbling, bumbling interviews, and this one was no exception. He kind of sputtered along, and eventually got it out. And then Rick Steiner did his dog face gremlin kind of gimmick, and it was what
More
it
of
was.
a modern day interview where they're trying to remember what they want to say.
Yeah.
Wasn't as easy for them at this point. I don't know if ever, but
Yeah, Scott was never a good interview.
no.
I mean, I'm
And
sorry.
that wasn't their deal, but
Yeah.
it was pretty cheesy.
I mean, it was what it was.
Yeah.
But, Frank, any thoughts on the Steiner brothers interview? I mean, it was pretty quick, but
Yeah, it was pretty quick, but I gotta say, I loved Scott's. I loved Scott's promo before this one because I loved, he was asked like, "You got any strategy going into this?" And Scott, just his tone, the way he scoffs at the idea of having any. No, we have no strategy. Like strategies for losers. Give me a break. Come on. We don't need no stinking strategy. That cracked me up. I liked that. And one thing I want to say in favor of the production design of this pay-per-view event is I liked the backgrounds that they had for the interview segments. I liked the spooky bear, tree branches
I
and,
did
and
too.
bushes in the background.
Yeah.
They kind of reminded me of like the publicity stills that you'd see of like Lon Chaney Jr. as the Wolfman, like clinging to the branches of a tree, like underneath the full moon.
yeah. Yeah, I forgot to mention that. We did have a graphic in the beginning that introduced us to the Halloween Havoc thing, and then we did have that. But as far as the rest, I guess when the wrestlers would come out, they'd kind of make it a little bit darker and have have the smoke coming out, trying to make it look like fog. But that was pretty much, at least to this point, that's pretty much the extent of the Halloween theme.
Good. And I'm kind of glad that's all they did. But that was a cool background there on the interview because it wasn't too much.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this takes us to
Yeah,
Matt.
I did like the graphic in the beginning where they have the animation of like their ghosts and you see the tombstones with the their names on it, like Muda and Sting and Ric Flair, and they have this little music that goes along with it.
Yeah. No, yeah, I mean that was cool. But I just remember like I mentioned in the beginning, I remember like thinking, "Oh, okay, well this is I don't know. I just felt that they could have done more with the Halloween gimmick myself." But which they did later on. I mean, the announcers later on would be dressed up in costumes, and they would do like a little bit more. One of the Halloween Havocs that we were at Joe Louis Arena, Terry Funk ended up getting pile drived on a pumpkin
Yeah,
by
that's right.
by the Nasty Boys.
That was
So
amazing.
stuff like that, right? But so match number 5, Doom with Woman, the debut of Doom with Woman versus the Steiner Brothers, and I do got to ask. I know that I don't remember if we watched this pay-per-view as it happened. I'm
I
thinking
was thinking that. I don't think we did.
maybe not, but either way, how long do you think it took the crowd to figure out who Doom was?
No.
About 3
I
seconds.
just remember being like perplexed that they just wouldn't say that's frickin' Ron Simmons and Butch Reed.
Russ did screw up one time and said Reed. He said Reed did something, and then if you notice, he kept saying Greed. Like
I
he
didn't
said Greed
catch-
about 5 times after that. So if anybody would have said anything, he could have been like, "Oh, well, I just said Greed, whatever." But
Yeah, that was a shame they wouldn't. I had some notes on that later. So
But again, a decent match. The whole thing here was Rick Steiner, and this was actually a pretty funny thing that they did. Rick Steiner had met women was sitting in the crowd for a while in the front row, and she was dressed up very conservatively, geeky or whatever, and her name was like Robin Green. They did a whole
yeah,
thing
I
where
forgot
Rick
about that.
Steiner ended up taking her out on a date, and then she turned heel, and that's why she brings in this team. Obviously, the team is Ron Simmons and Butch Reed. They will later on get unmasked by the Steiners, and then they got more over. Once they got unmasked, they
yeah,
ended up
definitely.
getting more over. But yeah, again, I mean, I thought this match was a pretty decent match. Again, this is the Ole Anderson era. This is the Jim Herd era. So it's also the era where they really kind of started pushing the quote high impact maneuver stuff.
yeah, pick them up
so-
and throw them down.
Right. So there was a lot of this in this match, but I don't mind that. So I thought this was actually a pretty decent match. Frank, what are your thoughts on this match?
pretty good tag team match. Both of the Steiner brothers looked really good. Did we get a Frankensteiner in this one? Didn't he pull a
Yeah,
Frankensteiner?
he did at the
Right,
end.
right at the very end. Yes.
At the very end, it was like off of an Irish whip too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's normally how he used to do it.
Okay. See, it was when he was like Papa Pump. It was always like put him up on that top rope and then bring him down to the canvas that way with the Frankensteiner. But early on, it was like always off the Irish whip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or just him standing there a couple times, you know.
Yeah. Well, for the most part, that was the Frankensteiner, though. He would whip him off the ropes and catch him and flip him over that way. And that move had actually been done before. They gave him credit for creating that. But Ricky Morton in like a lot of the old Midnight Express matches, he used to do it.
Yeah.
But it was a little bit different. I mean, I don't think Ricky would whip him off the rope and do it. So I guess that was like a little bit unique at the time. But
Yeah, when I was watching it, I thought, okay, that's appropriate. Good, we got a Frankensteiner on the Halloween event.
yeah,
But I got to tell you, I'll admit it, I didn't recognize Butch Reed, but I'm not familiar with him at all. I depended on Wikipedia afterwards to figure out who the other member of Doom was. But it was only about minute and a half in, I think, before I recognized that was Ron Simmons underneath the other mask.
right.
Nice.
Yeah, it's I mean, Butch Reed. I mean, if you didn't grow up in that era, I wouldn't expect you to know who he was. But anybody in the crowd, I'm sure, would have figured it out real quick.
Oh yeah.
Anybody that was familiar with Reed. Well, I mean, Reed had just left WWF not too long before that, so
Yeah.
he was pretty recognizable. Ron Simmons was pretty recognizable because he had wrestled in WCW. So, yeah, I don't think it was, and who knows how big of a secret they were even trying to keep it.
Everybody knew.
Really, right. So yeah, they did. The ending of the match came with Doom getting a victory over the Steiners with the old loaded mask gag.
Oh yeah.
The Robin Green or woman loaded up, I think, Ron Simmons' mask. Oh, no, it was Reed's, I think. Gives one of them a headbutt with the loaded mask and gets the big victory, which would lead to a feud. And I want to say that Doom never got another victory over the Steiners after
I
that.
don't think they did.
But then later on, like I said, after they got unmasked, then they got a bigger push.
Yeah. It was a lot better to watch them then because they were more themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
Now for this, I noticed like another thing with the crowd. The crowd was ready for this match. I mean, they knew it was Reed and Simmons. They knew it had an opportunity to be physical and that type of match that they were looking for. You mentioned Dr. Death Steve Williams earlier,
Yeah.
All four of these guys fit that bill. Fit the Philly crowd perfect,
Yeah.
The mask on Doom, the beside just having your intelligence slapped because you know who they are, you miss Ron Simmons in his like facial expressions. He always looked like one of the most intense people like ever in wrestling. And you
Yeah.
just take that all away. Even though he was good with his body language and all that, you missed all that. So that was kind of a bummer. But Woman, probably one of the most underrated managers ever in wrestling, for my
Yeah.
money.
Yeah, I could
She
can see
knew
that.
when to do everything. Her like facials, everything. How she sold was like perfect.
Yeah.
Her timing was there.
Mhm. Yeah.
Want to give
Yeah, I
her
could
some
see that.
and lots of clotheslines in this match and on this whole card. Lots of clotheslines.
True, it gets worse later on, though.
Yeah. And another thing, Jim Ross, I bet you he was upset because he couldn't mention all of the sports accolades for Ron Simmons and Butch Reed.
Well, one
Yeah,
thing.
that's one thing. I just wanted to add that because you talked earlier about how that's one thing that stands out in my mind about Halloween Havoc 1989 is we are treated to an extensive history lesson. I mean, Jim Ross does not miss an opportunity to give you a very, very detailed rundown of everybody's football career.
Yeah.
Particularly the college football stuff. We find out, like, right in the opener with Z-Man and Mike Rotunda that Mike Rotunda was the national punt, pass, and kick.
Right.
Runner-up. He was the runner-up
at
when he
13
was a
years
kid,
old.
teenager. And then we find out later on that Luger was the youngest professional football player ever, 19 years old with CFL. So, I mean, we learn a lot about
True.
college football, and we get lots of history lessons courtesy of Jim Ross in this one.
That's true.
Yeah, exactly. What a contrast it is when you watch AEW now, and he has no clue who the wrestlers even are.
A couple other things on this,
But I digress.
Yeah, it's true. The difference, NWA matches, like one of the things I noticed doing this, they let the heels get a lot more offense as compared to nowadays, and even then, like WWF matches or even some other territories. 8 minutes and 50 seconds into this match, I wrote, worst match of the night so far. The finish better be good. And then the finish, it was a good finish. And they announced the team as Women's Team of Doom.
Yes.
But I thought the finish saved it. Other than that, I thought the match was, just two people like, Steiner's, how many more clotheslines can they do? Even at the time, it was like, come on.
I don't know. I mean, it was what it was. I mean, I guess you just expect that from these teams. And like I said, we saw quite a few matches from them later. But I didn't have a problem with it. I thought it was an okay match.
It was a good finish though. So,
but I will say this: even if you didn't realize who it was at the very end, the camera was right in Ron Simmons' face, and he said something. It's like, okay, if I didn't figure out that it was Ron Simmons by looks, I definitely would have figured it out by his voice.
Yeah, because even during the match, you could hear him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so that brings us to the next interview, Gordon Soley with Lex Luger. And I crap on Luger a lot, but I will say that I thought this was a pretty good promo by Lex.
It was. It was what he should have been the whole time.
And I think Soley tried to trip him up there
He did.
because he asked him.
Yeah, definitely.
Because he asked him how many championships he won just so he could get that zinger in that he threw out later, and Luger just totally ignored it and just answered with something different.
Yeah, I thought that was like crappy by Soley. I'm surprised. I wrote that down. Like, why did he ask that question? There's no answer for it.
Well, because he was hoping Luger would give him the answer, and then he could say what he said at the end, the little zinger with, well, that just means that you've lost it 3 times or whatever. Whatever he said.
He's trying to bury Lex. Unprofessional.
Right, that's the impression I got. Yeah,
Me too. And we've
seen
seen Gordon Soley forever.
Yeah, that's exactly that. That had to be exactly what it was. Now, Frankentiner, were you that familiar with Lex Luger? I mean, you probably would have seen him. Did you see him in his WWF days or his WCW days later on, or both?
I grew up watching him on the weekends. WWF had an afternoon show, and I remember seeing the highlight of him slamming Yokozuna on board the battleship.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did watch him during his WWF run, and I used to play as him in the WrestleMania, game that came out in the mid '90s. I think it was Midway did that one.
Okay.
That I was watching him a little bit when I was growing up.
Okay.
But it was the WWF stuff that I saw then. Okay.
So that leads us to match number 6, the U.S. Championship between Lex Luger and Flying Brian Pillman. So Pillman comes out with a gaggle of cheerleaders, and this was like something that I thought
sweet gaggle.
Like when they came out, if this was like more modern times, they missed an opportunity in my book by not making the cheerleaders up as zombies. Because there's nothing. I mean, you can't beat zombie cheerleaders.
I didn't get to see that because I watched it I didn't watch it on WWE Network.
Oh.
So I watched it just almost by match, and they had most of like the interviews in there.
Oh, okay. Well, during the match, they kept throwing it out there to the cheerleaders.
Yeah, I'd see a couple of them, and I'm like, I couldn't remember what they were from, and they just, those are Pillman's cheerleaders, and I'm thinking, well, they're wearing Luger's colors,
Oh yeah, right.
So okay, I get it now.
Frank, you were about to say something about the zombie cheerleader idea, or no?
I was just agreeing with you. I think that's a pretty good idea. And you got me thinking too. It's like, wait a minute, I know there was a horror movie I used to see on the shelves of Blockbuster where it was like zombie cheerleaders on the front of it. It was like Horror High or some high school themed horror movie.
I think you nailed it.
Cheerleaders with pom poms, and they had like skeleton faces.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and I think it is Horror High. Yeah,
Horror House?
like the cheerleader was kind of like bending over. It was like a skeleton zombie looking cheerleader. I think you're right.
I'm thinking
Um,
it's either that one or Hell High. There was a Horror High and there was a Hell High. It's one of those two, I think.
yeah, I'll have to look into that.
You notice they never make the cheerleaders beat anybody in movies. They're always getting sliced in half and running and screaming.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's about time for
I know.
a cheerleader revolt
Yeah.
in the movies.
Make them do those flips and do like a Frankentiner, you know?
I will say this, just a side note. We saw a shot of Hawaiian shirt guy from ECW.
I didn't catch it.
Yes, we did. He was standing up, yelling at. I'm assuming Luger.
Was he in the same
some
spot?
point. Yeah, I'm pretty
Really?
sure he was in
I'm
the
going to
same
watch
spot
that again.
too.
I didn't even notice.
It was just real quick, and I obviously they didn't call him Hawaiian shirt guy. That didn't catch on later till he was in ECW. But yeah, he was right
I didn't
there.
even think to look.
He was right there in the
Huh.
in the first or second row. So these guys had feuded over this belt for quite a while, and I have to say, as much as I crap on Luger, he looked like he was in charge of this match. I mean, he almost looked like Nick Bockwinkel.
I'm going to sit here and just go.
These two
Look like Nick
guys.
Bockwinkel.
I mean, as far as being in charge of this match,
Yeah.
it shocked me.
Yeah.
Because at the time, I'm sure. Well, okay, I will say this too. I think Luger worked better with guys like Pillman and Steamboat.
Well, they knew how to work with him, you know?
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know if Pillman did,
Luger was
but
calling
Steamboat
this match.
did.
Though. You could tell Luger was calling.
Oh,
this
he
match,
called
though.
the whole thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was shocked. Josh, Frankentiner, Jesus. What-
Frank.
Frank, what did you think
you know,
of Luger and Pillman?
I agree with you. I think Luger looked good in this match, and as I said a few minutes ago, I mean, my experience with Luger is like, the body slam of Yokozuna, and I think of, right away I think of like the Human Torch finisher that he had. But I mean, watching this match, which I think was an outstanding match, I was struck by the fact that he was really a striker, Luger. I mean, lots of punches, lots of overhand punches, lots of kicks, and lots of clotheslines from him, which kind of surprised me because I just had it in my mind that he was like a big power guy, so there was going to be lots of suplexes and slams, and he certainly would do that here and there. But I mean, he struck me first and foremost as a striker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing, when he first came out, I wasn't exactly sure if he was still a babyface. I thought when he first came out, because he kind of got a decent. I thought the crowd was chanting Luger, but maybe they were chanting loser. I don't know.
I wasn't sure either.
Yeah,
'Cause I couldn't remember if he was. I think he was. I don't know if he was a good guy or a bad guy.
I'm pretty sure he was a heel.
He had
but,
to be
but
because
when he
Pillman was trying to be the good
but
guy.
when he first came out, I was like, man, this is a rare babyface versus babyface match. But then it wasn't too long after that, Luger started throwing punches and raking the eyes and stuff. So then that quickly changed. But yeah, the ending comes when. Well, I mean, leading up to it, Pillman goes for a drop kick off the top rope, and he kind of does like the drop kick where he lands on his back. Luger moves out of the way.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people could tell just the way that he kind of moved out of the way. It was kind of the way that he would have sold it if he would have got hit with it. But it was just over to the side. So I think the crowd was a little confused with that. And then and then Pillman eventually, does I don't know, a flying body press or something, and Luger hits him with the hot shot and gets the victory.
Yeah, it was
The
awesome.
clean victory. Yeah, Brace. So I think that this at this point is the best match of the night.
Yeah, by far, I think. Maybe not by far, but like a comfortable margin. I'm watching this match thinking, if I watched it at the time, would I have the same opinion of it? Because I know I look at wrestling a lot different now than I did back then,
Yeah.
My likes are different, my dislikes are different. But Luger, like his facial expressions, and he's always had these. I mean, it's one of the reasons why, without being a, quote, good worker or have work rate or have good promos, he was able to get over because of his body, and he could still sell.
Yeah.
He could sell So, Luger, we mentioned that calling the whole match. Pillman didn't know how to work. He didn't know how to work a hold. This is one thing that Luger worked this entire match. He buried Pillman. He flat out outworked Pillman to the hilt. Pillman like would sit there like hold an armbar and just hold it like it's a wet noodle. And Luger's working the whole time, and Pillman's just going, get a hold on Pillman. He wouldn't sell it. It's like he didn't know how. And it just
I didn't really
amazed me
notice
that,
but-
yeah, if you ever watch that again,
Okay.
watch Luger like work holds. It was
Okay.
awesome.
No, I mean, like I said, Luger, I was shocked at this match, really, and how good Luger looked.
Yeah,
I mean, Luger looked like a longtime veteran, and I think they had mentioned he'd only been working
3 or 4
few
years
years at this point.
Yeah, same with Pillman.
Yeah,
But Luger, I mean, everybody buried him for the last 25 or 30 years or whatever. So, people just look at him. And at the time, I didn't think he was all that great, but
right.
geez.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I noticed the Wyndham influence on Luger in this match.
I thought about that at some point as well.
Yeah, and it was before he tried to do the superplex. It was kind of the way he was moving, the way he was carrying himself.
One of the things that I thought, not that they were the same, but his punches, I thought was definitely influenced by Wyndham.
And I'll tell you what, Frank, you mentioned the punches as him being a striker. That's one of the notes I wrote down, and how tight his punches were. I mean, they didn't, all of them didn't look like they were going to take your head off,
Right.
but they were, he did the short punches from underneath, but they were all good. Even when they had the camera closed up on Pillman's like face, you could see Luger sticking him like right next to the jaw. And I thought, man, he's punching better than anybody in the business can punch now, and it's Lex Luger.
Yeah, I gotta agree with that. I
agree
was
with you.
shocked.
Yeah, that was great. Tommy Young, the referee on that one. That was the best match so far, easily.
Would you agree with that assessment, Frank? That at this point, this is the best match on the card.
Yeah. I mean, if it wasn't the match that I was most into, the matches that I was, most into are our next match, Road Warriors taking on the Skyscrapers, and the Thunderdome main event. But I mean, like, just looking at it purely from a technical standpoint, like how hard they worked, the way it went, the momentum shifts, all that stuff. Yeah, I would say Luger and Pillman was match of the night. And I agree with you, Brace. I mean, like, he threw some really hard, fast punches, and he got in there close. And I like what you said about his facial expressions too. I mean, this was my first good look when I sat down to watch this in preparation for this show. It was my first good look at Luger since I was a little kid, a fledgling Frankentiner. And I have to say, I was really impressed by him, and I was surprised by that because, as you guys said, I mean, when Luger gets brought up, people just dump on him. They have, nothing but bad things to say about him. So I kind of got it in my head that he was just this overrated glory hog. But I mean, he works hard through this match. He doesn't take any breathers, and he's got the passionate facial expressions, and
He was into it.
striking looks very impressive. I mean, he was good. He really impressed me in this match. He did.
And it just like looking at the other thing that stuck out is just how off Pillman wasn't even off. I just don't know if he was that good of a worker. Even maybe later on he was. But
I think later on, he got he got a lot better. Pillman is another guy that at this point worked the same match every time.
Yeah,
for the most part,
all spots. You know.
Yeah, it was just the same stuff over and over.
Yeah.
I think he got a lot better later on.
He gets too much. I say that because he gets a lot of credit now for being this great virtuoso and whatever. And he wasn't. I never thought he was like that, but he was never always like that. I think you could really see it later when he turned heel. Yeah.
That's when he was able to do a lot more, and you could see that he had gotten a lot better.
Yeah. So we got to quit dumping on Lex.
I agree with that because I've gone back I've gone back and watched some of his stuff from Florida. Amazing.
Yeah.
Like the match, I think it was the match maybe that he won like the Florida title from Jesse Barr.
Jesse Barr is really good.
That
too,
blew my mind, like how good that was.
Yeah.
I think I based a lot of it on when Luger, because when he first showed up and they immediately put him in as a horseman. I think that kind of, because he didn't really fit the horseman mold
He
as
didn't
far
earn
as
it.
as far as I was concerned. Right. I think that a lot of people, including myself, have had that prejudice against him
You're here.
for all these years.
Yeah.
Um, well, so that takes us to our next interview, and that's another one with Christopher Cruz and
Crispy Cruz.
and the Road Warriors. We pretty much get our typical Road Warriors interview.
It was good though, man.
It was good, and
Yeah.
they were good. And I
Yeah.
mean, come on, both of those guys. Hawk gets a lot of credit for being the better interview, but
Yeah.
but Animal was no slouch either.
Right. Yeah.
So that takes us to match number 7, the Road Warriors versus the Skyscrapers, with Teddy Long. Road Warriors obviously with Paul Ellering at the time.
And the Skyscrapers in this one were Spivey and Sid.
Spivey and Sid.
Sid Vicious.
At this point, I want to say that this is probably the toughest test that the Skyscrapers had. They At this point, I think they had just destroyed jobber tag teams pretty much all the way.
You know, I
all
think
the way
you're
up,
right.
up to here.
Yeah.
Now, to me, this match was a total mess. And I want to say, I've heard interviews with Animal recently, and Hawk did not want to go along with the program, but it seemed like Animal didn't want to go with the program either in this match, from what I could tell. I think I remember him saying, I don't know if it was this match specifically, but I think I remember him saying that they wanted to make the Skyscrapers look strong, so they were really supposed to get a lot more offense than they did. And you could kind of tell watching it that they would be going for something. Sid and Spivey looked like they were kind of panicking in the match, because I think that they were like, hey, what's going on here? And they don't know what to do.
That's interesting because I didn't remember. I don't know if I knew that story or didn't remember it or what, but watching it, I thought the Skyscrapers got a lot more offense than anybody else did,
Against the Road Warriors?
Yeah.
I mean, that may be the case, but I'm pretty sure that they were supposed to look even stronger, and then and then the ending was going to still be a DQ,
Yeah.
and then they were going to continue.
Yeah, I could see that.
Continue that feud.
But they still, because I was thinking about that through that. I'm like, if the Road Warriors don't sell, they can probably take Sid Vicious, but they can't take Spivey. I mean, one-on-one.
No, I mean, honestly, I don't know. Yeah, it's been well documented that Sid really wasn't the toughest guy, even though he looked like it.
Yeah.
That one shot where they were doing the test of strength, oh my God, Sid looked like a monster.
I know.
He looked like a Master of the Universe figure.
Yeah.
Action figure.
Yeah.
So Josh, Frankentiner, you said that you were looking forward to this match. Did it live up to your expectations?
I was really looking forward to it because I love the Road Warriors. I did see some of them growing up, and I like them a lot. And I'm a big fan of Sid. I hear a lot of bad things said about him too, but I've been a big fan of his for a long time. And I like Dan Spivey. I loved his Waylon Mercy WWF gimmick. I loved his promos, and I just liked that whole thing. So I was really excited about this one, but it wound up being a weird match to me because it sounded very much to me like, just listening to what Bob Caudle and Jim Ross say during their commentary, it seemed to me like the agenda of the company was they were really going to push, the Skyscrapers.
Yes.
But the Road Warriors were just not having any of that because they figured, well, no, you're not going to bury us and, have them be the next big dominant tag team. Because it's like, I got the feeling like the Road Warriors were kind of beating them up early on, like not selling much and kind of knocking them around. But every time they did something like that, there was like no acknowledgement of that from Caudle or Jim Ross. They'd be like, well, what do you do? What do you do? I mean, when you do that to a guy like Sid Vicious and he doesn't go down, like they kept, no matter how much the Road Warriors are beating on the Skyscrapers early on, the commentators, all they talk about is how impervious to pain and indestructible the Skyscrapers were.
Yes.
So it seemed to me like there was kind of like conflicting agendas here, and I agree with what you said, is that made it just a little bit of a mess at times.
Yeah.
But overall, a pretty cool match, though. I mean, between giants. Yeah, that test of strength moment between Hawk and Sid. I mean, yeah, that just, what a visual. Those two arms locked up. That was neat.
Yeah. So on the one hand, I'm watching this thinking, this is kind of a cluster. Uh, but on the other hand, I'm watching it thinking, well, if you did think that wrestling was not a work back here, you would just think that was a good hard hitting match. I
Yeah.
mean, it
Yeah.
didn't look as as choreographed as a lot of other matches do, obviously. So I mean, I really had no problem with it, but the whole time I was thinking, I was just remembering that interview that Animal did, and it did look like Sid and Spivey were like trying to get back on track, like, and I think Animal and Hawk just totally went against what was supposed to be going on.
Some nice quality start and stops in there.
So anyway, the match ends up ending on a DQ. The Warriors end up winning it by disqualification because I don't remember the deal was with the big key that Teddy Long carried around. But
Yeah, I
anyway,
couldn't
they ended
remember
up getting
either.
that and hitting everybody with that, and that was the end of that one. Any more thoughts on that match, Brace, before we move on?
Yeah, the crowd was really ready for this one. I mean, they were. Yeah, they were either standing or on the edge of their seat waiting for the destruction to ensue. And you brought this one up earlier, Mad Dog. This is where I wrote down, the pick 'em up and throw 'em around era.
Yes.
That started to get away from wrestling and more toward the high impact moves only.
Yeah.
And look how big everybody's been on the damn card.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
And also, that was, normally you don't put like disqualifications on pay-per-views, supposedly.
Well, back then they did.
Right. But this was a quality disqualification. I really liked this
was.
one. When Teddy Long came in with that golden key and nailed Ellering, it was so good because it just looked like it wasn't planned out to the nth degree. It looks like it just happened.
Yeah.
Like a disqualification just somehow happened.
Yeah.
Like Teddy Long said, enough of this. I'm going to go
Right.
in there, boom.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll agree with that.
And there was even a smattering of jeers for the Warriors, Road Warriors.
Yeah, there was. Yeah,
It wasn't a whole lot, but there was like a lot of the good guys.
Well, the way they were building up the skyscrapers at the time, they had a lot of fans.
Yeah.
And
We would get mad when they wouldn't do what we wanted them to either.
Right. Right. All right, let's move on because we're running low on time here. So the next interview is Christopher Cruz along with Sting, Flair, and Ole Anderson, which takes us to match number 8, the main event, the Thunderdome cage, which is an electrified cage with some Halloween gimmicky stuff around the outside of Ric Flair, Sting, along with Ole Anderson as the Terminator against the Great Muta, Terry Funk, and Gary Hart as their team's Terminator. Bruno Sammartino, special referee. The Terminators were the only way that you could lose the match is by submission, and the Terminator throwing in the towel. Right off the bat, we get a fire on the cage, and Tommy Young ends up going up along with somebody else trying to put the fire out. This actually got Tommy Young suffered some burns on his hands from trying to put this fire out, or from putting the fire out. We get a cool spot right in the beginning where Muta decides to go up there and try to put the fire out with the green mist.
Yeah, the Turner Art Department had to get their wares in on this pay-per-view. Now, what type of dork, I'll say that for just without going off, would put a bunch of like Halloween art decor over live electric wires on a steel fence?
Exactly, and it looks like they had put up. And why don't you just gimmick the cage?
Yeah.
I mean, do you really have to have it where there's some actual electricity up there,
or even all the crap they put all over it?
Yeah, and then why would you put tumbleweeds outside?
Yeah,
but anyway,
because tumbleweeds and Halloween have a lot to do with each other.
Yeah. So I mean, the match was okay for what it was. I mean, Terry Funk, one of the all-time greats, one of my favorites of all time. I think he was probably the MVP of the match.
Yeah.
He was trying to make the most out of what they had. Frankentiner, what are your thoughts on the Thunder Cage main event?
Well, silly as it might have been, I'm gonna admit, I kind of liked the tree branches and the cobwebs and that kind of stuff that they had, like, over the top of the Thunderdome itself. But with this match, my first thought was that there was like a lack of communication between the wrestlers and the commentators, because from the way that it had been built up and described by Jim Ross and Bob Caudle, I got the impression that the entire thing was going to be electrified, and you couldn't get anywhere near it, you couldn't touch it. And then it's like, as soon as it gets lowered, both Muda and Funk are just climbing all over it. But I thought that the commentators did a great job of just going with that. It seemed like they really didn't expect Funk and Muda to start touching the thing, let alone, like, crawling all over it. And was it Bob Caudle, looks at Terry Funk, what is that nut doing? They just attributed it to both of them just being totally out of their minds, and gluttons for punishment.
I think you might be right, because in my memory, and I mean, I could be wrong, I'd have to go back and look, but I think they did. I think they did just, when they were building it up, just said it was going to be an electrified cage. They never specified that it was just going to be the top of the cage until right then.
Yeah. And
so that's what it was. It was just the top of it, because I'd watched this match twice, and even afterwards I thought, well, so what was it supposed to be? Like, just patches of it were electrified?
You couldn't touch it.
Spots were electrified, and that was like the additional danger of it. But it was just supposed to be the top part?
Well, I think they changed it after the beginning and said it was just going to be the top part. But then again, you still had Terry Funk and Muda and everybody else hanging around up there the whole time.
That did fail, luckily, because it was supposed to be like around the top, so nobody could get in and nobody could get out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
during the match, the electricity gimmick, however they had that hooked up, it was legit. You saw the fire, but it did fail.
Okay.
Yeah, so they were able to grab.
But at one point, somebody went up there and they did like the shocking thing. I think Muda might have and touched it, and they touched on it. But yeah, I think you're right, Frankentiner. I think it was just kind of miscommunication, if nothing else. I don't think anybody was 100% clear on how it was really supposed to go.
Yeah, because they couldn't have did the whole fence, because it was sitting right next to ringside.
Yeah. So, I mean, the match is what it was. I enjoyed it for what it was. There was some decent spots. It wasn't the most technically sound. I mean, not that it should have been technically sound, but even the stuff that they were doing kind of looked sloppy. But and it almost looked like they didn't even really have like the match planned out a whole lot. I mean, it just seemed like they kind of went at it. Later, you would see that style applied in ECW matches, but at this time on the WCW end, that's really not how things were. And I remember watching it for the first time thinking the same thing, that it was just kind of a sloppy mess, and I think everybody just kind of did what they wanted.
Yeah, because they made the cage too much of the program, so they had to work with that cage, and they could have just done a little more in the ring without the cage. I
want to throw this out here. I have said before that I do not consider Ric Flair is up there, but I don't consider him the greatest. And one of the reasons why is the way that he sold stuff. He was able to get away with doing pretty much the same match for a long time, but like they wanted him to start doing different stuff like this. Like, obviously this is a different match for Ric Flair at this time.
Oh yeah.
When he was getting thrown into the cage, it looked like he was like scared that he was actually gonna like get
electrocuted.
No, but it was just like I didn't like the way that he was getting sold, getting thrown into the cage.
Yeah.
It was almost like he was anticipating it and he looked scared. I never liked the way that he sold the pile driver, and we saw that later on, because he would like grab the feet, and it just never looked right. It was almost like he was scared to like sell certain things, and I mean, if nothing else, that's my big knock on Ric Flair, and that's why I will never consider him the greatest of all time, because of his selling or non-selling abilities.
I thought the same. I almost thought the same thing, but my take on it is, you don't put Ric Flair in this match. Like, they tried to put him in a tables, ladders, and chair. In any other gimmick matches, he's a wrestler. He just hasn't been that type of guy to do those.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Frank, you got any thoughts on that?
I mean, if Flair looked a little hesitant to touch the cage, that probably contributed to the feelings that I had, that it's like not everybody was like on the same page going into this. I mean, like, with this main event, this Thunderdome match, I got this feeling that, like, they're all in there. Nobody really knows how this is going to go, what's going on, what the the rules are, how this cage is supposed to be sold, and so that but that at times would kind of like add a little like air of excitement for me, because it genuinely looked like nobody knew what could happen next. So
Yeah.
at times that looked a little messy, but I mean it was also exciting too. So.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. So the ending comes when Hart and Ole both start coming to the ring. Ric Flair has Terry Funk in a figure four. Sting is giving him splashes off the rope. Those two both start to come into the ring. Ole hits Hart. Hart inadvertently throws the towel, giving the victory to Ric Flair and Sting. Overall? I mean, the match was good for what it was. Overall, I thought this was actually a pretty decent pay-per-view. It's a different time, obviously, different era. It seemed like they were trying out a lot of new things at this time. Frank, what would you give this pay-per-view rating overall?
Before we go there, can I give my thoughts on the last match?
Yes.
Quickly, 1 minute. Elbows from Funk and Muta to Sting were cool when they had him laying down and they just kept dropping the elbows on him.
Yeah, that was cool.
I didn't like the match. I thought this was a precursor to what pro wrestling is going to become. No timing, long, stupid spots. It just took forever to set everything up and not a lot of flow. And I understand it was the cage and, you got Flair in there and whatever else, but it just, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I didn't like it. The cameras missed a lot of shots.
They did.
And then they had the gimmicks,
They did.
Funk's hanging from the top, and you couldn't see it. And was Muta bleeding in the match? Because I saw
it was hard-
blood
it was hard to
on
tell.
Bruno's shirt, and I didn't see it on the other guys, but I thought I saw a cut on top of Muta, and I know.
He might have.
And I don't think they would have
didn't-
sold that on commentary.
No, I didn't catch that, but possibly.
And a smattering of booze for Sting. And Bruno got a nice pop coming in. Philadelphia's home
Yeah, he did.
territory.
Yeah.
For the match, the three biggest pops were Sting when he dove off the cage, at the corner of the cage. Second, when Bruno punched Muta, that got a nice pop. And the third pop was the finish. And the fourth, Bruno's entrance, if you want.
Yeah. Frankentiner, what do you think of this pay-per-view overall?
Well, I love Halloween, and there was enough spooky stuff in there to keep that side of me happy, and there was enough good wrestling in here too, so that I definitely wasn't sorry that I watched it afterwards. I enjoyed myself, and but I mean, in the end, it definitely, on the whole, came across to me very much as an experiment with lots of room for improvement, which to me they certainly did in the future of Halloween Havocs.
Yep, I would agree with that assessment, and with that, I would like to thank you, Frankentiner, for being on here. Give us any spoilers on upcoming content abnormals.
Well, for the 60-second, well, thank you for having me on here. It was a pleasure talking to both of you. I love this show. Big fan of the Doghouse segments that you do for MWO Wrestling. Been a big fan of yours for a long time, and really, this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, those are quality segments, aren't they?
All right,
They are, yeah. They are. As a matter of fact, I went to the Redford Theater this past weekend. I went to go see The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And what Mad Dog Butch did in the Doghouse at Trick or Slam, that inspired me. I actually I wore a Mule Mascaras mask to that show, and I managed to eat a Snickers bar through that Mule Mascaras mask because he took out a Baby Ruth in that segment. I thought, wow, that was impressive. I'm going to try a Snickers bar here, and I had to stretch it out with my thumb and forefinger in the mouth, but I did manage to pull it off.
I do have my inspirational moments, yes.
That was definitely one of them for me. With 60-second episode coming up, it's probably it's going to be an episode of Suspense, and it's going to be starring Vincent Price, because I feel bad that we went the whole month of October without featuring Mr. Vincent Price in anything. So
Big
I'm
Vincent.
considering making all of November is going to be Vincent Price month on Content Abnormal. So.
All right. Sounds good. Once again, thank you very much for being on here. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, nice job.
And we
Me
should
too.
do this again in the future sometimes. So
Definitely.
thank you, and I will encourage everybody to check out Content Abnormal, and we'll definitely be in touch, Frankentiner. So thank you.
Very much.
All right.
All right. Good night.
Brace Beemer, any parting words?
Yeah, that was I like that pay-per-view. I thought it was a pretty darn good pay-per-view, top to bottom. You know, it was entertaining. A couple matches I could do without, but I mean, you can do that with anything you watch. So, great job, Mad Dog, as usual. And everybody have a good night.
Yeah. Thank you. As always, keep checking the Butch Blood Facebook page for updates. We should be back a couple times in November. So take care, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Definitely check out Content Abnormal.
I was not there for rehearsal. I don't need it anymore. When I show up just in time to pop, you can